Welcome to another episode of NewsPoints on the Air, a production of the North American Division of Seventh-day Adventists. I'm your host, Milan Medley. Our guest for today's episode is Rockefeller Twyman. Everyone who knows him calls him Rocky. And anyone who knows Rocky knows he's had a fascinating life. In fact, he's had so many rich experiences and has so many stories. We decided to feature him in 2 of our episodes. Inspired by the civil rights movement and molded by Adventist education, Rocky has led a life of service for decades. In addition, he is a classically trained musician and a fervent prayer warrior. Rocky's can-do attitude has sustained the 72-year-old's drive to do all he can to help others. Rocky currently resides in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, where he has made quite a name for himself within the realm of public service. He has amassed an extensive and impressive network that ranges from major media networks and government leaders, who have also acknowledged him for the numerous bone marrow donation drives he's organized over the years. I'll quit talking now and let you get glimpses into the life of Rocky, someone who is truly one of a kind. All right, Rocky, so what triggered your passion to serve others? Where did that come from?
Well, it came from my Adventist background. In Atlanta, Georgia, I was really inspired by Jessie Wagner, my principal there in that small Adventist school. She encouraged us to get out and help others. And then I went to Pine Forge Academy, and Paul Jones, who was like a father to me, and Elder Justice and his wife, they just all encouraged me to go out and help others. And one thing about Pine Forge I loved was the end gathering we would do. I really enjoyed that. Not only because we got off campus, but it was just a wonderful way to go out and help others. And
one thing I want to, for our viewers and listeners who may not know about Pine Forge is a boarding academy, Seventh-day Adventist boarding academy up in Pine Forge, Pennsylvania, about 45 minutes from Philadelphia. I'm well aware of Pine Forge because both of my parents are alumni of Pine Forge Academy. I would not be here. I would not exist without Pine Forge Academy. So those who don't know, and it's a primarily African-American boarding school and one of the only African-American boarding academies in the nation right now.
Right. And it's on a beautiful, beautiful grounds up there. Because coming from Atlanta, the urban area of Atlanta, was so great to go there to see that. And then I went out to La Sierra University, and I had a professor that I loved, Dr. Gary Ross. He used to be at the General Conference in Religious Liberty, but I just loved him. And he gave this big lecture on the Glorious Revolution. And so when I became the vice president of the student body out there, I used that as a theme. And we did so many wonderful things in the community. We had beach evangelism. We had Operation Cookie for people whose kids were incarcerated. We would take cookies to them, and just all kind of things. So that was just really a marvelous experience there. I just really got the real sense of volunteerism. And, I've just carried it on with me through all of my media jobs. And I mean, you're going to talk about the bone marrow thing later, and the Pray at the Pump movement. And, now we're down in Atlanta trying to help Congressman John Lewis's legacy to be preserved. So
yeah.
That was where all that came from.
Yeah.
And then studying, just studying the Word of God, you just realize that you have to give back. if you're going to be a child of God.
So Pine Forge really helped activate and inspired you to pursue a life of service.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it was just a key element. And also my little Berean Junior Academy in Atlanta, Georgia,
Mm.
Jessie R. Wagner, she was just magnificent all the way down the line. In fact, she was the mother-in-law of Elder C.D. Brooks.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was a great connection there. And also, not only that though, but Butch Fordham was her nephew.
Yeah, these are all legacy leaders within the Adventist Church, and especially with regional conferences. So you're really a product of, this is an example of the benefits of education, especially within regional systems.
I've been so blessed to have an Adventist education, and I will never forget the way I went to, because see, my parents were not Adventists, but they sent me to Seventh-day Adventist schools all my life.
How did they hear
That was
about Pine Forge if they weren't Adventists?
the way they heard about it was through Jessie Wagner, my principal. And I will never forget this because her husband started Pine Forge. And when I was in the 8th grade at Berean Academy in Atlanta, he died. And that was the first funeral I ever went to. My mother took me to there. But after the funeral, Mrs. Wagner was sitting out in the limousine waiting to go to the cemetery. And she called my mother over and said, send that boy to Pine Forge. And that's what my mother did. And it was just a life-changing experience for me to be in that rural setting. It was just, I mean, that's why I know I can't leave the Adventist church, because I have seen the hand of God all throughout my life, and another person, Elder Harold Cleveland in Atlanta, who was my pastor, because I was very blessed to have gotten all kind of scholarships to all these different worldly schools. But he convinced my parents to send me, to La Sierra. Well, he wanted me to go to Oakwood, uh, but, but I wanted to go to the West Coast and everything. And it worked out well because they needed more Black people out there, because that was at the time when the Black militancy uh, had really arisen. And and I was able to, I think, break through some of the barriers out there at the time. And we even had a chorale out there. It was interracial. And you won't believe this, but Ted Wilson was in my choir, the president of the General Conference.
The current
He was
president?
the current president. He was a loyal member of the Rocky Twyman Chorale, and he has a
Wow.
beautiful singing voice. It was just really, you know, uh, quite a coincidence. But we all knew. We said he is going to be president one day. That's what we said. And I will never forget one thing he told me. He said, Rocky, I really didn't know any discrimination, because my father was president of the Southern African Union and all my classmates were Black, So that was just all these things just have made me realize that, you know, if we turn everything over to God, He will lead us and show us what He wants us to do. And I just encourage everybody to, listen to the writings of Sister White. I know right now they're really being attacked. People just attack her writings, but there's so much wisdom in what she is saying. And just put God first and let Him lead your life.
So now I want to talk about your time in Atlanta. So I take it that's where you grew up, or
Yeah.
at least in that Atlanta area. So, and in Atlanta, those who know history, especially civil rights movement history, Atlanta was one of the headquarters, so to speak, of the movement. And you happened to be there during this epic time. Can you give me a few of your, and when I say epic, I mean, some people equate that to like a really big positive thing. And it did create positive work, but it was in the face of tremendous um, discrimination, acts of racism. So it was a tremendous movement that was needed to combat such hate that was seen across the nation. But I was hoping that you can give two or three of your most memorable experiences from your time in Atlanta during the civil rights movement.
Oh, wow. There's so many. Well, I know one thing, I really wanted to go to jail for the cause, but I was too young. They would not let me go,
How old were you?
to the jail. I was like 13. And I really was really, but what I was able to do, I was able to picket. And so we picketed the Kroger store there. We were trying to get them to uh, hire more Black people there because it was in a predominantly Black neighborhood. And
They
people,
weren't hiring Black people to work in the store?
no, they weren't. I mean, they weren't doing like, the cashier's jobs, anything. They were just doing just very menial jobs there. And but yet they were getting a lot of money from the Black community. And they threw rocks at us, some of the white people that came by, and they spat on us and everything. So that was a very interesting experience.
I'm really intrigued by the mindset you had when you were 13 years old when you said you wanted to go to jail. Can you explain that a little bit? What did that mean for you at that time?
Well, it just meant that things were so bad, and we were thought of as second-class citizens, and so many other people were doing it. I mean, they weren't my age, but I was surrounded by all these college students because we didn't live that far away from Morehouse and Spelman.
Okay.
And I just, it was just inspiring to see young people just doing and not just sitting around talking. And it was a glorious time to be Black. It was a glorious time to be around.
We're talking 50s, 60s. What years
No,
specifically are you?
this is like in the 60s. This is like around 60, 65, around in there. No, not even 65. It's earlier than that. It would be like around 61, 62, around in there. But it was just really, really wonderful. And the spirit was very high too. I think people really did feel close to God because they knew that we were up against some terrible forces. Because You did not have police protection or anything. But I will say this about Atlanta, though. It was better off than a lot of other southern cities like Birmingham, and because Atlanta has always had a very thriving middle class.
When did you first start your PR work, and how did that come about?
Wow. Well, it really started at DC General, I think, you know,
Okay.
and
You were
I
working there, like you were an employee of the hospital,
I
or?
was an employee of the hospital,
Okay, okay.
and I think my first really major big thing there was the bone marrow drive, because there was an employee there who was a friend of mine. She needed a bone marrow transplant, and at that time there were really very few minority donors, particularly Black minority donors in that National Bone Marrow Registry. And what I did was I just used the media to recruit more people for that um, registry. And it just kind of exploded,
Hmm.
um, because her name was Alicia Nelson, and she was a lab technician.
Hmm.
And it was so wonderful because, she had to go through all this chemotherapy and everything. And she came to all the drives that we had for her. And that really helped to boost turnout, because at that time, they were really sticking people with needles. And a lot of Black people didn't want, to take the test because they had to be stuck with needles, because of the syphilis experiment down there. And so they were really afraid. But
And this was to get tested to see if you can be put into the system, right? Not for
right,
physical donation, but just to see if
right.
you would be an ideal candidate.
Yeah, that's right. There were just many. I mean, I did many drives at the Adventist churches, because I remember one particularly at the Capitol Hill Seventh-day Adventist Church when Whitley was the pastor there.
Whitley
There was a
Phipps.
there was a woman who had a baby, was just like a year old, and I just Whitley let me have her get up before the congregation and plead with people to get tested. And she got up there and just cried. And I mean, the response was overwhelming. And I will never forget it, because it was like a day. It was a really cold day. It was like in February, because I had built the whole thing about around Valentine. It was like a Valentine thing, and it was just really something, the way some of those people stood out in the cold to get tested. That day we tested about 300 people from that church. It was just
Wow.
really wonderful.
This
And
is helping me understand your very large portfolio. I'm getting a much better understanding of, because you've been doing these bone marrow drives. Continue to do them today, the bone marrow drives, and then your contacts with the media. It seems like the personal connection with that lab tech at the hospital um, really helped to launch this passion about bone marrow, and then working with those babies who were born to mothers who had that addiction, that disease. That launched, that really paved the way, because now you have all these media contacts and you have all these drives, and you're known throughout the Washington, D.C. area for these things, but it seems like it was what happened in the 90s at DC General Hospital that really set things off. Is that about accurate?
Yeah, that's right. But then another thing about DC General Hospital, it was also the hospital for homeless people.
Mm.
It was like the only hospital that would really take in homeless people that didn't have insurance. And so that sparked my passion to helping those who were homeless. And here again, I remember the Missionary Society of the DuPont Park Seventh-day Adventist Church, which is in that area. They came over, Brother Washington. I remember him. He was over the community relations for the church, and they did wonderful things. They brought food over there. They they would go around and pass out magazines to the homeless patients and just give them comfort. It was just wonderful. It was just a wonderful experience, and they really did come through in a big time way. And then of course, um, other churches, other Adventist churches, helped out also because they knew how great the need was over there. And the hospital was very close to the DC jail. And so it was just like right across the street because we would treat a lot of people from the DC jail. And they would come in there in handcuffs and everything. And so it just gave me a sense of security. And uh, when I was at Pastor Phipps's church, I had a tremendous choir. They were just, that was the Capitol Hill Chorale. They were just fabulous. And a lot of them had been former Oakwood Aeolians. So I really didn't have to do that much, to get them to sound good because they were just absolutely tremendous.
Yeah.
But one year, Christmas fell on a Saturday, on a Sabbath, and we went over to DC General Hospital. That was during the time of the drug war and everything. And we sang for the gunshot and stab wound victims of the hospital. And the press went crazy. CNN and everybody showed up. And then what we did, we hooked up with the Jewish community center because, they often came out on Christmas and everything to spread love and joy and everything. And it was just a tremendous story. I will never forget that. They because we left church, we went to church, and because we weren't that far away from the hospital, so we just went on over there and sang, and then went to our Christmas lunches. And so because Pastor Phipps was really very much into using music to help heal wounds, etc. And that's what we did. And then one other time for Mother's Day, the choir, I can't remember how that hookup came, but somebody in the choir, their mother knew Stephanie Mills, the great singer Stephanie Mills. You might not remember her, but she was a good friend of B.B. Winans. And so they went with us one Mother's Day into the DC jail. And we had, at that time, I was working at Howard's radio station. And so the radio station donated perfume and flowers. And it was just a beautiful experience. And we were more blessed than the people that we were in there trying to bless. it was just tremendous. But God had worked it all out. He was the one that had put all those connections together.
Yeah. And now I want to transition because you mentioned earlier, how prayer is so important for the work that you do. And over the years, and even to today, but you've led several prayer campaigns. The Pray at the Pump, which,
Yeah.
was for praying, to have lower gas prices in a time in our country's nation where gas prices seem to only go up and up and up. There didn't seem to be an end in sight, even for the many times where our government was on the verge of shutdown, because, for whatever types of gridlock that took place in Congress. You've even prayed for uh, earthquake victims in California. You don't even live in California, so you're
Yeah.
known. You're known to you know how to rally the troops for prayer. Can you talk about how you're still doing that now?
We have a group called the Pandemic Comforters.
Hmm.
I gave them that name. That was what God placed on my mind
And about how many
hard.
people are in your group, and how do you know them?
Well, it's a small group. It's not but about 8 of us, but we do have a group in Atlanta too, and it's kind of expanding. Uh, Anybody that wants to join us can, but we just recently went over to cheer up Congressman Jamie Raskin, and so we really, had to keep it down because the number of people, because he's been receiving so many death threats because of the situation.
And
But
he, just for people who may be unaware of Congressman Raskins, who I'm proud to say is my congressman here from the state of Maryland, but he is leading you may know him from the impeachment trials that are going on nationally. There's been a spotlight on him, but he also recently, over the holiday, like Christmas Eve, lost his son. His son passed due to depression. So he took his life. So you and your pandemic comforters went after his son passed away. Is that correct?
yeah, we went over there and we sang some. Well, one of his favorite songs is "I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom,"
Hmm.
and I just had some wonderful performers. Bernadette and Winston Charles from the Seabrook Seventh-day Adventist Church. They're international Caribbean artists, and they had written this song called "Dry the Tears," and they used it for our fundraisers for Haiti. And then, of course, David Griffiths is just absolutely magnificent. He um, he did an arrangement of "You'll Never Walk Alone," and uh, he put in "We Shall Overcome" in that too. And Raskins was in tears. And his family was out there too. Um, and it was a social distancing event. They were on the front yard and everything. And we were. Well, I just praise God because on that event, on that day, he called us spiritual advisors. And
Hmm.
we also gave him and the family copies of Ministry of Healing because I can't think of any book that can help you more
Hmm.
during a time like this. And that's another big part of my ministry, passing out literature, because I think that's so important. We can go out there and sing and pray and everything, but we need to leave something for the people uh, to read, to understand, and just to realize uh, how serious the times are right now.
Yeah.
Um,
It seems like literature and also music is part of how you minister. When did music first get added to your arsenal, so to speak, in helping others?
Well, I guess mm, that's a really good question because it's been with me all my life.
Yeah.
But I guess
And what type of music are we talking about? Piano? Do you sing? What type of music?
no, I direct, and
Okay.
I I'm a choir voice. I'm not a solo voice. I mean, I can show you how to produce the sound, but I'm not going to be out there soloing. Um, but I that sort of started at DC General too. I organized musical programs there, and one summer we had an art series where we had musical performances and everything. But I think it really came to really a strong fruition uh, when I had that group, the Capitol Hill Chorale at Pastor Phipps's church, because we sang concerts for homeless families, and like we did that thing at the DC jail. We also went to the men's jail, and I just found it to be a wonderful way to raise money because I've been associated with this little Haitian church, Adventist church out here in Rockville, Havre de Grace. And we put together some wonderful programs when Haiti had all those terrible things to happen. There was in one year they had a big earthquake, and then they had
Mhm.
a huge hurricane that came through there, and the people are just so poor. It's just really a tragedy. They're the poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere, and so God uh, just opened up the doors for Dr. Charitable and I to work together, and we would have community fundraisers to help them. Um,
So it
and we
seems
raised a
like
lot of money. We raised a lot of money for them too, because I was able to get some really good people to come and perform.
you are able to assess needs of communities within your network, so to speak, within Washington, D.C. and beyond. You're able to assess the needs of the people and of the people they care about and use your musical acumen, you use your resources with the or your contacts with the media and just your network, and you use those things to help in whatever way you can.
Yeah, that's true. And then God just impresses me to do stuff. I mean, I'll wake up in the middle of the night and it'll just be so clear that this is what you need to do.
Wow.
And then I just kind of just follow the lead and go right on. And um, it's just been a wonderful experience to just follow God's leadings and give God the glory for the things that He has been able to, use me with.
Yeah, and also I want to ask you about your Nobel Peace Prize campaigns that you've had over the years, specifically, but the one that you gained national and international attention for, the Oprah for the Nobel Peace Prize. Can you talk about that campaign? And you've had several other campaigns since then, but talk about how the one for Oprah came about.
Okay, well, I was at uh, this dinner, and there again, it was Pastor Wintley Phipps. They had this big dinner for his Dream Academy, which helps children whose parents are incarcerated.
Mm-hmm.
And she came there and she spoke and she said, God gives me my every breath. And then she proceeded uh, to present a check for $1 million for his organization. And that just kind of hit me. And I I just felt impressed to start that campaign. And the Washington Post style section just put a little blurb in about it. And then it just kind of exploded. And I decided to try a kind of new approach to the Nobel Peace Prize, to get signatures showing that people really did want uh, Oprah, because it's very hard to get the Nobel Peace Prize if you're a celebrity or a star like that, because they usually give it to people that are activists, you know, like Nelson Mandela, that kind of thing. But I felt like, that she was truly an activist, but in a different kind of way. So it just exploded. I mean, people were flying me all over the world, for that.
Really?
Yeah, I ended up in Morocco. They it, it was a big thing over there, because one of the 10 most beautiful women in the world was a big Oprah supporter. So she really did campaign. But it was a wonderful experience to be in a country like that. I'd never been to Morocco. And it just, I don't know what to say. But it was always a wonderful opportunity to witness, because I would pass out literature too, you know, um, wherever I was, California or whatever. And what we were able to do, we were able to get her nominated, because we
Okay.
even went down to Atlanta to Jimmy Carter's center there. And we had a little crusade there, and we got really good coverage because we were encouraging him to nominate her. Because the Nobel Peace Prize, you have to have somebody that has uh, won, to nominate you. That's one of the criteria.
Hmm.
And it comes about so quickly because the nominations have to be in by February the 1st. But it was a wonderful experience. I mean, I got free trips everywhere, it seems. So, but I just regret that I could not. They don't give that award posthumously, so I couldn't do it for John Lewis. We tried, but they just don't do it that way, because I just felt like he really did deserve it all the way down the line, because him putting his life on the line. But of course, the competition is so stiff for that thing every year.
You were involved in a prayer, multi-state, multi-conference in terms of, Adventist network response to the death of George Floyd in the summer of 2020. Can you talk about that for a bit?
Well, all I could say is God woke me up one morning and just told me to do something like that.
And what
I
was it
wish,
exactly? What did it entail for people who are not aware of it?
well, it entailed going to different cities to talk about, how we could prevent something like this from happening again, and to explore the significance of his death. I just found that to be absolutely fascinating, that whole event. And I just thought that Denise Crary and your father did a wonderful job of coordinating everything together and putting it all together.
In partnership with people from the Emmanuel Brinklow Seventh-day Adventist Church, that's who you mentioned, where my father's pastor. So it was a partnership between the two, and it was like a virtual prayer. I don't want to say pilgrimage, but kind of, because it
It
was
was.
different virtual
That's the right
events,
word.
right? It was different virtual events of cities that would be along the line, along the route, if you were driving from Maryland to Minneapolis.
Yes. It was just marvelous. And we need to do something like that again real soon for, some of these issues that are out here right now. But I did want to say one other thing about Pine Forge.
Okay.
Another really great event that God was able to use me to coordinate was our 50th high school reunion at Pine Forge. Because Barry Black was in my class. We were classmates.
Oh, the Barry Black, who is
the Barry Black, and I'm
who
just
is
so
the
proud.
Senate chaplain, the current Senate chaplain. Yeah.
And what, and boy, God has just used him so mightily. But for our 50th class reunion, uh, God gave me the idea to contact Lyndon Johnson Robb, who was the eldest daughter of President Lyndon Baines Johnson. Because our class, we were the class of 1966, and we greatly benefited from the programs of her father. And so I just contacted.
Which
Well,
program?
all those anti-poverty programs and
Okay.
affirmative action, all that came under the Johnson administration.
Okay.
But the thing that was so, I said, well, it's worth a try, because our class was really in that time period. And so I wrote her a letter. And to our surprise, she came up there to the campus.
Wow.
And spoke. And it was wonderful. And it got, a lot of press coverage because of who she is. But she told me something very interesting. She said, I normally don't really come out like this anymore. But she said the letter was just so compelling. And all I could say was, it was the Holy Spirit that got hold of you, darling. Because, I mean, I just wrote a letter from my heart. I mean, I prayed before I wrote it, but it was a marvelous experience to have her there. And I interviewed her before the crowd that was there, because that was an alumni weekend. And, she answered questions and everything.
Wow.
And she's a lovely, lovely lady. And we're staying in touch with her because, we hope to have some projects that we could, whereby she could remember her father, because he is and Barry Black really preached that Sabbath, because he brought in about how no other president had done more for civil rights than Lyndon Baines Johnson. And
And
that's
what
really,
year was this? What year did you?
that was
What year was your 50th?
2016. That
Oh,
was
so
our fifth.
that was fairly
It
recent.
was fairly recent. And
Wow.
it was really a beautiful event. And I I was just so pleased to make that connection, because um I mean, I just, in my wildest dreams, I didn't know what was going to happen, but God worked it out. But here's the thing, though: the Washington Post had done a big story about the Johnson family, and how they were somewhat, angry at the way that their father really had not gotten the publicity for all his hard work, because you don't really hear that much about him. All you hear about is the Vietnam War that he was involved in. But he really opened up the doors, because that Civil Rights Bill of 1965, the Voting Rights Act, I mean, that was what John Lewis built upon, the Voting Rights Act of Lyndon Baines Johnson. So anyway, we're hoping to do something for her father at Pine Forge. I don't know what it's going to be yet, but we're going to do something, because do you also realize that her father was the one that really started the college work study program? And so,
I did not know that.
yeah, I didn't even know that either. But it was just a thrilling experience to have her there. And she came at a time because her husband's been very ill, but she came on up there anyway and did it. And, you know, um, she didn't want us to fly her up there or anything. She just said, well, just come and pick me up in the car. And so we just,
No fuss. No fuss. Yeah.
I
Very
mean,
low profile.
she
Yeah.
was just so low profile, but yet that is a very, very wealthy family, because the mother owned just several television stations. And they just, and there, if anybody's ever in Austin, Texas, please go to see that presidential library. Those daughters have really done a great job preserving that, and they have a wonderful section for civil rights. So anyway, that
Yes.
kind of propels you into John Lewis.
And also, just one comment before we do that. It seems like a lot, if not almost all, if not all, of your ideas to reach out to media, to different churches, to call different friends starts with, well, God impressed upon me. Like you're very intentional about saying that the ideas come from God. Um, like in that case in particular, I don't know if, I mean, that's just very impressive that you would think to write the daughter of a president whose policies helped you, but you said God did that, and because of
And he
that, it was
did.
successful.
And he did. I mean, so I also conclude that he actually wrote the letter,
Mm.
because I didn't see anything that was so different about it.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
she did. She said it was it was just so compelling, and
Wow.
she had to come. And I almost fell out of my seat, because, I mean, it was just a letter asking her. Of course, I put in the background about how our class had been greatly benefited from his works and everything.
Yeah.
But the timing was perfect, because they had just done a story in the Washington Post about how they really,
Mm.
don't feel like their father had gotten the credit. And so, God said, write her. And I just did it. And it was a wonderful story. And
Yeah, yeah.
it got some really good coverage up there.
With your uh Peace Prize, Nobel Peace Prize campaigns, with your bone marrow drives, with the work that you do with different churches and religious organizations, how do you keep it all organized? What is, it seems like your day to days fluctuate because you lean on, what God may impress upon you. So how do you juggle it all?
Well, I'm single. That helps. If I were married, I don't know if I could do all these things. Maybe that's why God didn't send me to Oakwood. He sent me out to La Sierra. So anyway, that's just, but anyway, I just kind of like, I just really let God lead me. I just pray, and then he just shows me what he wants me to do at a particular time.
Mm-hmm.
And that that's the best way I can answer that. He just really impresses me as to where he wants me to go, and I just try to follow. Um,
Yeah, because your portfolio is so unique. And it seems like it has to be led by something greater than you because it's, so different than other people who pursue a more traditional public relations career. Yeah, it has to come from something bigger than you.
well, it is. It's God all the way, and that's another thing I think we really have to do. We have to start giving God credit for things because we're so apt to take credit for
Hmm.
ourselves, but we need to start praising God.
How do you, when you do help these churches, when you hear of a need or hear of something great going on within your network, within your broad network, how are you able to get them featured on media like local news and the media networks? How are you able to use your context that you have built over decades? How do you get them into the media spotlight?
Well, I just I used to work for J.C. Hayward and Maureen Bunyan, and they really helped me with television news writing, and they sort of taught me how to use certain buzzwords, but also
And these
I
are
do a
local journalists, just for
huh,
people who these are local journalists.
yeah, they were, but they were just top notch. They were
Mhm.
just uh I mean, when they were at Channel 9, it was number one all the way down the line. J.C. Hayward and Maureen Bunyan, they were just,
Yeah,
they
those are
were,
great people to have be your mentors then.
yeah, right. And so, I sort of learned from them about what kind of makes a story go. But also, I network a lot. I go to a lot of different events uh, where the press is and just meet the people behind the scenes a lot of times that really make the decisions because they're the ones who decide whether a story is going to be covered.
Mhm.
So, I make it a point to get to know them at, different stations and everything. And then he would just put people in my way. And, I just kind of nurture the contact.
Leaning on God and reaching out in our community and helping others, that definitely seems to be um, what leads and guides your decision making. And I just really thank you for taking some time to share some insight into your work and the impact you try to make on others. And I'm just very grateful, Rocky. Thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in to NewsPoints on the Air. NewsPoints on the Air is produced, edited, and hosted by me, Milan Medley. Executive producers are Dan Weber, Kimberly Moran, and Julio Munoz. Graphics are by Jonathan Lapointe. Listen and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Share with your friends and family and give us a 5-star rating and a glowing review. Also, be sure to subscribe to NewsPoints. It's our weekly digital newsletter. Lever. Thank you for tuning into this episode of NewsPoints on the Air. NewsPoints on the Air is edited, produced, and what else do I do? I don't know. I do this thing. I almost had it. I was so close. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of NewsPoints on the Air. NewsPoints on the Air is produced, edited, and hosted by me, Milan Medley. Executive producers are Dan Weber, Julio Munoz, and Kimberly Moran. Graphics are by Jonathan LaPointe. Listen and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Share with your friends, share with your family, give us a 5-star rating, nothing less, and write a glowing review. Also, be sure to subscribe to NewsPoints. It's our weekly digital newsletter with news stories, special announcements, and ministry resources. Visit nadadventist.org and click on news. If you have questions or comments for me, send them to ontheair@nadadventist.org. That's ontheair@nadadventist.org. That's it for now. We'll see you next time.